I hate online discourse, specifically when it comes to controversial media containing a menagerie of taboo. Cause on one hand, you got these overly puritanical types spouting from the windowsills the shocking news that bad things are bad. Which, fine statement, I might even agree with it if you can believe it. But it's always followed up with something akin to, anyone who enjoys seeing such things in their media might as well be doing them for real. A notion that any person with a working gourd should know is ridiculous. It's a statement in the form of a stake that media literacy will be put upon to burn. But then, I look at my other hand, to which I find something somehow more annoying. A bunch of far-right lunatics fighting back, not with the genuine arguments, but with slurs, death threats, and other forms of whining. There's no real nuance to these two straw men going at it. It's as deep as slinging mud. The discussions may die down eventually after a few months, but until then, the trenches of empty discourse are virtually inescapable. Every website, every group chat, every day. Hell, I've had a coworker in his late 50s talk to me about the topic of this video, and that conversation still doesn't feel quite real. Point being, it's too much, and thus, at least to my cherry ass, makes the relevant media something of a tainted fruit. I want to take a bite, but I know it'll curse me with annoyance. See, I don't particularly care that this discourse is unproductive on a larger scale. I care about it for me. If there's a slurry of fury about something, I avoid it like the plague no matter how up my alley it is. I find, as crazy as it sounds, I enjoy things a lot more without people bitching in my ear constantly. This video may be months behind the actual discourse and not as clicky because of it, but I had a way better time due to my patience. I feel now I can accurately assess both this game and the stigma surrounding it. All good things come with time, they say, specifically in the form of RPG Maker games about incest and cannibalism. You know, the pinnacle of media built for people like me. The coffin of Andy and Leyley is pretty. Art is never truly objective, but this art style might be the closest thing to uniting us as a species. Even in the minds of the slanderous, room is always saved to praise the art. It's minimalistic without dipping into god-awful book cover territory. Its rare use of color and simply drawn designs makes each character stand out not just from each other, but from basically anything else out there. That's not even mentioning how expressive the expressions are. One look at any of these mugs and you immediately know what they're conveying. Envy, slyness, joy, disgust, it's so good, man. Moving on from all that pish-posh faux art review stuff, something I find often gets left out of discussion with regards to the coitus of Andy and Leyley, likely because 90% of you hacks never played the game, is the music. I'm gonna play this track for 10 seconds and no longer because our collective attention spans are cooked, and I want you, my dear viewer, to comment what you think it conveys / where it would play in the story. So yeah, I think it's pretty obvious. This is the track that plays when our darling siblings feel the need to host their own Donner Party. Additionally, to my ears, and I know this might sound like an insult, but it's not, I promise, it sounds like creepypasta music. Either played in a game based on a story, or in the background of one of those reading videos. It's an insipid sounding track with silverware badgering about and an unsatiated chorus. It's a little on the nose, but it sets the tone perfectly for the morbid subject matter while keeping it stylized as to not truly discussed. To get more specific, I feel like it's something you'd hear emulated or backboarded into those old ROM hacks from the mid-2010s a la Sonic.exe or something, except obviously flipping the ratios of quality. Honestly, the comparisons to creepypasta, for me at least, don't end there, but I'll spare you the rest. This game is just dripping in that kind of charm in a good way, and I love it. We can see all the aforementioned elements from art to style to music working perfectly in sync on the title screen. Amidst this username 666-ass background, our two leads, Andy and Leyley, colloquially known as Andrew and Ashley, look at each other. First, the characters. The audience, or the onlookers in this scenario, are paid no heed. Ashley looks at Andrew with her goading eyes, while Andrew looks unsure about something he's clearly already done with that knife and fork. To note, he doesn't look upset about what might have happened, but is instead focusing on his sister's gaze, and perhaps wondering if he appeased her. These two are a little in the head, and if you couldn't tell from all the marketing, art, and discourse, are indeed not great people. The track that plays here, like the one I talked about earlier, also has 2 layers. One of which is the simple melody that sounds almost carnival-like. It's drowsy in comparison to the high fructose stuff you might be thinking of, but it is similarly melodic and enchanting. The other layer, however, is this drowned-out drone. It goes along with the main rhythm, but it lingers just a moment longer and etches its way into your head. Enticing and foreboding, like a temptress with devil horns. Though I've heard some people say that there should be more warnings before you jump into Andy and Leyley's kissy kissy fun time a la this Destructoid article, I think that if you continue past both the Steam page and this title screen, it's kinda just on you, man. Anyways, the point of this long, indulgent exposition on my part is that this game makes a hell of an impression. I wanted to play it from the moment I saw it, but sadly, the moment I saw it was on a tweet that looked something like this, and all I could do was sigh at yet another month of my feed being full of mouth breathers. I opened up with talking about this, but let me add that I fully know that this is just a skill issue on my part. I could just not give a f, but I ain't built like that, you see. Sister Kisser People Soup Simulator seemed, and is, so up my alley. But all I saw for months was hate for things and tropes that I think are cool, and that the only people who seemingly went up to bat for them were just the worst. Inevitably, I started asking myself things like, am I in the wrong? Am I a bad person for thinking you can have an interesting depiction of what toxic codependency does to people? Obviously no, and I wish I could just not care, because it does get kinda degrading having to reaffirm that to myself again and again. I've spent most of this channel's history talking about fucky-wucky stories with the VN bent, so this is far from the first, nor will it be the last, time I get myself into this flustered chicanery. Regardless of what the haters and debaters say, The Coffin of Andy and Leyley is a good game, good story, good all that. To explain why that is outside of, yo, he fucks his sister, that's my goat, I want to talk about a few of the cool parts in the opening moments. I'm limiting myself to just the intro as to not get too spoilery in case one of you actually wants to, play the thing one day. We might go on a tangent or two even, it'll be fun. Then we'll use that knowledge and understanding to really get into why the discourse around Andrew and Ashley's sibling abuse simulator is really, really dumb. So let's get into it a bit. Episode 1 opens with a brief flashback from the perspective of a young Ashley talking to her brother. Most of the words are etched out, so we don't have much context, but 2 things are made crystal. 1, yes, it's just like the poster says on the Steam page. Ashley is indeed very not good. Even for going context, it's clear that Leyley is pressuring Andy into something he'd really rather not do, yet does anyway to appease his sister. Which leads us directly to 2. Andrew is a sopping wet blanket. His sister clearly has him in an emotional stranglehold. She has Andy fully convinced that only she could love someone as messed up as him. He's older and said to be the more rational one, so you'd expect him to have more of a backbone or fight back in any way against this, but he doesn't. Even though we see later that he does have others who love him, totally making what Ashley says here untrue, it doesn't matter. She's already walked all over him. Now, this doesn't make only Ashley bad and Andrew a victim of circumstance. Neither of them are good people, and that's made explicit. This is just the story establishing their power dynamic, and how it takes very little to make Andrew do a lot. Upon awakening from the dream back, we get that first taste of sweet, succulent dark humor. There are many ways this game avoids falling into bad ye old creepypasta tropings despite literally being built the same way, but its glib tone is the main one. Find nutrients not to die is the first thing you see before beginning gameplay proper. The Hackshop 8-bit chiptune that follows truly completes the joke. Now that I've explained it, you can laugh, by the way, just throwing that out there. Dark humor, I find, is one of those things people either like or they have normal brain function. It's not entirely black and white like that, mind you. It's just that part of the reason for such a stark divide is that it's very hard to do correctly. However, there is one saving caveat even if it is bungled. A depressive audience, for the most part, will still be receptive to the joke if you get them to think, OMG, me. For example, if someone were to trip at the entrance to a packed elevator and then said in a non-serious manner, "It's so over, I gotta kill myself." It's gonna be more concerning than funny to 90% of people in that elevator. The leftover folk are either gonna relate and laugh in their head, or they have some context on the tripper and know they're playing it up. That context is key to getting everyone in on the joke, and the sooner you establish it, the better. This game knows that and opened with something small to establish who the player character is in Ashley. You get this serious sounding scene discussing something morbid, then find out she wasn't all that serious about it. She was just going through the motions, as it were. Everything she does is for what she sees as survival in the sense that her life is an NES RPG. She has goals and only follows an A to B progression to achieve them, and when it comes to the future, she's never looking more than 5 feet ahead. I think this little find nutrients not to die bit is funny the first time through, but it gets way more so when you find out that this gamification of life and death is just how the dumb bitch thinks. Walking around and interacting with various things around the apartment complex, I find it quite simple actually, reveals that her brain works in if-else statements like she was programmed by Yandere dev. Most of what she interacts with breaks down into either can or cannot be eaten. She has one goal: consume, and blindly looks to achieve it regardless of bumping into shelves or breaking shit. There are a few things she differs from thinking this way about that are notable, mind you. Well, maybe not notable in all cases, but I think they're funny and cute, so I'm talking about them. First up, she likes staring at television static. Nothing wrong with that. As a kid, I did it all the time and thought I saw deer jumping. But Ashley is 20 years old and is just as no thoughts head empty as I was at 7. What a wacky girl she is. Second up, when looking at her parents' old bed, she has some pretty interesting thoughts. But third, and actually the only one that's important, the front door won't budge. They've been locked in here for months without food, something which probably doesn't ameliorate the siblings' already busted mental states. There are some other things she has comments on, but outright synopsis sucks, so let's move on and talk about the in-game walking around sprites instead. Why not? I know basically all RPG Maker games do this, but I feel like the dead inside looking sprite you see walking around and interacting with the game world makes a nice showcase for how dire things actually are. These two sprites of Andrew and Ashley look sad and pathetic, and that's definitely the state they're in. It makes a neat dichotomy between the actual artwork of the characters, which better showcases their personalities and self-perceptions. This split, at least I feel, aid the bits of dark humor too. I think these sad little sprites, paired with lines like the one you get for interacting with the coffee machine, "There's only so many times you can brew the same grounds," are pretty funny. It's deadpan in a sense, and wouldn't hit the same way if Ashley had a sprite for it. My observations about the in-game sprites ends there. I just thought that was kind of a neat thing to bring up. Eventually, if you search long enough, you'll find a can of tomatoes in the trash, which nicely leads us into meeting our other MC, Andrew, as Ashley wants to show off her findings and get praised. Something kinda neat is that as you approach Andrew, that chirpy music goes silent, as if the game is drawing importance to Andrew. Which makes sense from Ashley's perspective because to her, he is basically the most important thing. Ashley isn't a purposefully manipulative person, her brain's just built different. Her priorities are simple, and in her hierarchy of needs, Andrew is number one to a point that actively harms them both. He's something of a favorite person to her if you're familiar with that concept. She wants Andrew to treat her a certain way, though he hardly ever does. Due to that fact, she's learned how to draw exactly what she wants out of him. We see as such when he is stupendously unimpressed with the tomatoes she's found, to which she keeps presenting them over and over until she gets the replies she seeks. Andrew gets annoyed visibly, but knows it won't get him anywhere to object, so just as he did in the flashback at the start, he caves. As it was, so it shall be and all that. Small note, his accolades for his sister are written in a clearly sarcastic tone. You'd think that'd tick Ashley off, but it doesn't. Even if it was begrudgingly handed over with a sneer, Andrew gave her what she wanted. Not to mention, this is just how real siblings act. They can be real snide assholes to each other in a way that somehow just exudes care and love. Usually just, not that kind of love. I've mainly talked about Ashley thus far, but let's turn our attention to Mr. Graves for a bit. He hid the can of tomatoes for when they direly needed it. It is their last thing of food, period. It's a small, simple plan that gets thwarted by Ashley, but it does show that Andrew has a little more forethought than his sister. He's someone that plans for the future with what he has, but doormat that he is, his foundations for such are all built on straw. He could probably lead a normal life. I mean, we see that he was going to college and had a steady girlfriend before the events of the story, but he either keeps fucking up or stuff gets in the way. Stuff in this scenario being Ashley. They share an interesting relationship, if you couldn't tell. Ashley is both what keeps him from soaring and what keeps him going. Ashley has a fatal need for her brother to be in her life, but he has a fatal attraction for her after years of abuse. He's got a little case of Stockholm going on, methinks, to the point of asking his girlfriends to tie their hair up to look more like her. Something I actually learned from that Destructoid article from earlier. One may be more culpable than the other, but no one is truly the victim in this dynamic. They're more like parasites feeding off of each other. If you rip one from the other, they'll both starve. This is jumping forward a little bit, but no matter what choices you make in the story, Andrew will always choose his sister. There's a point where he is literally handed the life he said he's wanted the entire time on a silver platter, but he refuses because it requires abandoning Ashley. This is how they've lived since they were little, and though the game isn't complete as of writing this, it's likely that trend ain't stopping. They are insanely codependent on one another and will do anything to keep living that way, including but not limited to cannibalism. See, their neighbor, who shares the same fate of being locked inside without food, has been trying to summon a demon for weeks in order to help him escape. Everyone laughs at the idea, but he actually does it, and our toxic power couple witness it. Thing is, he had no sacrifice, so the demon took his soul as payment. A then break into their neighbor's apartment to shut off the ritual music, which sounds like this. And upon examining Devil Boy's corpse, Ashley posits, "That's a lot of meat." Which, place yourself in her shoes, starving for months on end and locked away without key. Sure, it's morbid, but can you blame her? Morally sure, but a bitch gotta eat. Andrew begrudgingly agrees, and they reenact their favorite Netflix show. It's here, however, where they go from trying to get a meal in to a little psychopathic. They were starving, sure, but they started meal prepping this dude with only a minor, "Ah, man, really wish I didn't have to do this, fuck," from Andrew. Keeping the flashback at the start in mind, our protags have pushed the line before, and from this point on, they will hold no bars about pushing it further. A fact that takes their already scuffed relationship and just makes it worse. Or better, depending on who you ask. The story continues from here and goes to some pretty interesting places, but this is all I wanted to cover. This is just the opening hour-ish of the game, and it is extremely telling about our two characters and how they live. Taking everything discussed into account, is it really such a wonder that the game implies they'll f*** one day? Just look at these two. They unironically live like this. Of course it ends the way it does. With how these two operate in day-to-day life, it's either Andrew grows a spine and permanently cuts Ashley out of his and everyone else's lives, or they f*** each other. This game, fun fact, has two endings. Can you guess what the one no one talks about is? Okay, taking everything into account one more time, I have a question to everyone who complained about the yucky incest implications. Genuinely, why is it that no one complaining, to my knowledge at least, had a problem with the cannibalism? If you're gonna baselessly be disgusted at something despite it being an exploration of the horrors that lead people to do awful and gross things, then why and how do you get through our main characters eating human? What I talked about earlier isn't the last instance of human gobble before Andrew and Ashley replicate Oriyimo, mind you. You can argue that they did it out of necessity the first time, but the second, they literally do it for shits and giggles. Full spoilers from here on out. Eating their parents, no one bats an eye, but Andrew eating his sister's pussy. Okay, in retrospect, that might be a little too far for a YouTube video, so let's just skip that and get back to it. I don't get it. The implied incest is where the line is drawn for people? Maybe I'm f***ed in the head like Mr. Graves over here, but it makes no goddamn sense. Look at this line from the Destructoid article about the game. As disgusting as cannibalism is, it's not an uncommon taboo to explore, but incest is another ballpark. This sentence is ridiculous. Hot take, they're both bad, and the game implicitly shows off why, in case, the audience was unclear or something. Crazy idea, but this is fiction, where you get to explore all kinds of things that are bad in a harm-free environment. You get to dive into the underbelly of the human condition and have these total pieces of shit take charge because it's not real. The stylization and dark humor are meant to showcase that this isn't a sincere condolence of these activities, but showing off how things could get this bad. This is a psychological horror game. It intends to disgust and scare. It's pretty straightforward if you think about it for more than 2 seconds. Maybe this game left its target demographic and got echo chambered into high heaven by the stupidest people imaginable, but I cannot fathom how so many people misconstrue this game's tagline or something as being, "Incest, incest, it's the best, put your sister to the test." Is our culture so cooked that y'all can accept ma and pa stew literally, but sibling love is some untouchable line? Media literacy is in shambles, man. The Coffin of Andy and Leyley is such a good dive into all kinds of taboo subjects, and it handles them with such care. But all of that's ignored because of the vague sexual implications between these two characters being gross. Because of that one thing, it gets slandered to no end as disgusting. That guttural reaction is so goddamn conservative. Media can be all kinds of things, and artists should have free reign to explore what they want. That's how we get amazing works of fiction and art. Yet these Puritans would have all artists shackled to making the same safe, sexless slop again and again. You might as well just get an AI to write your stories if that's how you think and feel. The Kotaku article titled "Cannibalism is somehow only the second worst thing you can do in the Coffin of Andy and Leyley" is both a joke and the epitome of this mentality. Its main points are not about the game itself, but how the reception to it being positive is bad because the game has incest. Oddly enough, the game itself and all other major aspects is understood well by the writer of this article. To paraphrase a bit, the art style and elements are appealing, and it really isn't that graphic. The game's horror comes from the psychological element of being in Andrew's shoes and going along with all this heinous shit. The article understands where the horror in the game comes from, but still chooses to focus on how awful it supposedly is for the contents therein. It's a brain-dead take, and it focusing on what are clearly shitpost Steam reviews is the nail in the coffin. These reviews are clearly not written with a sincere tone. They're jokes giving the game a 10 out of 10 because it's funny and pisses people off. The article seems genuinely upset about these inflated metrics. That and ick are its main points of contention with the game. I've talked at length about the ick aspect being stupid, but to cover the other one real quick, when have scores ever been the best indicator of something's quality? They get inflated and shrunk all the time at the whims of any mild movement. FMAB has been at the top of AniList and Mal for over a decade now, despite no one really talking about it anymore. Scores don't matter, reviews do. You can get a general idea from a score in most places, sure, but if you want something in depth, if you want to know if you're really gonna like something, why would you ever trust some arbitrary metric? For games and anime in particular, I always look to reviews if I'm on the fence about sinking my time in. If it's a good review, I'll know the reviewer's biases by the end, compare them to my own, and then know whether or not something is for me based on that. Granted, in some cases, it is just vibes based. If you laugh at these dumb Steam reviews, you'll probably like Andy and Leyley's sexy funtime extravaganza. But again, if you want something more in-depth, such reviews do exist and are as easy to find as these joke reviews. Such as, hopefully, this video. So, at the end of the day, caring about metrics being inflated, just kinda dumb. To conspiracize a bit, this misunderstanding on behalf of the writer of the article, or most people pushing this narrative that the Coffin of Andy and Leyley is bad because incest lol, is no mistake. While there certainly are some people young and/or dumb enough to go up to bat against this psychological horror game having incest as a scary thing that can happen, I suspect a large portion of this is simply to get outrage clicks. That's it. Money is views in the modern web economy, and I know I only clicked on this article, the Kotaku one, after playing the game because of its dumb title. Thank God I had an ad blocker on. The more inflammatory you can be, the better. The people adamantly defending this game from the woke left are all prone to click on and promote these articles and tweets for the sole purpose of attacking them. By extension, the response from the other side of the mentally ill equation is to have backlash at the backlash, as is basically blueprinted in the Kotaku article snarkily reprimanding the Steam reviews. Everyone wins in the game of ads and internet traffic in this equation, but the smart people like me who get to be annoyed, but more importantly, the damn creator of the game, who, due to constant harassment and the ceaseless cacophony from all sides, has all but erased their online presence. They don't want to be named or discussed, so I ain't gonna focus on them too much, but needless to say, this is a ridiculous thing to happen. That they were driven to this really sucks. Thankfully, we are still getting the last 2 episodes of the game later this year, and for that, I'm thankful. Because as we talked about, the coffin of Andy and Leyley is a damn good one, and I can't wait to see what's to come. I hope you all enjoyed this vid. 'Twas pretty fun to make. This isn't one of the big projects I've been working on for months, just something small I wanted to make in the meantime. It's January as of writing this, so I guess I'm obligated to make an RPG Maker focused video. I'm gonna try to get 1 vid out a month this year, and though I've already missed January by a few days, I'm still gonna try. Patreon is a website I'm on. If you really like the video, go throw me some shekels. Good night, y'all.